DevOps Iterations.
And here we are, a new iteration with Bernd. Thank you, Bernd, for your patience. We had some problems up to now, but now we are finally here. So, first of all, how are you?
We finally made it happen. Talked about it, I think, a couple of times also during config management camp last year. So we know each other for decades, I would say, primarily out of the Puppet ecosystem. My name is Bernd. I'm the CEO of a German service company named NETWAYS, and also from a monitoring solution named Icinga. NETWAYS was first, and Icinga came a couple of years later, started as a project, and then we created a company around it, and that is with cloud services we provide events and trainings, the things which matter in my business life, let's say it this way.
Good. I remember Icinga from the Nagios Split times. Actually, when there was a NetSaint before Nagios, as you probably remember well.
Yeah.
Nagios, and then there was this kind of polemics in the meantime. No, there was a sort of. It was not a sort of friendly breakup with the Nagios people. How is the situation now? What are the relationship with?
So yeah, it wasn't friendly. So we had at this time the company itself. We had a lot of Nagios customers, and we had also a very good relationship with the Nagios creator Ethan Galstead at this time, because we had the Nagios conference and we did this together. And so I wouldn't say it was a friendship, but it was a successful partnership. So we made money with Nagios Consulting in Germany, but also we contributed to the open source, and we tried for many years. Also, others did to have like an open channel to contribute in Nagios, because our main issue was that we were missing features at some point, but also our customers were complaining that there is no real innovation, and there is nothing new coming in. Even like small pull requests were not a thing at this time, but small patches submitted by users were not accepted. And this ended up that we, with others of the German community, and this, I would say, I don't know now, but at this time definitely was one of the biggest communities for Nagios, was the German community. We decided to fork it out. Anyhow, it was like ups and downs we went through. Now we don't have any relation to Nagios these days. We have seen them. The last time I've talked to them, to a couple of people from Nagios, was last year at Red Hat Summit in Boston. We met them, and it was honestly a pretty nice conversation. It was just like different people. They saw us like also as a competitor, but still for a large enough market. And as far as I know, they pretty much tackling now South America as their primary market. But yeah, there's no fight, I would say. If we can talk to each other. And I hope it belongs to the past in some way. That would be nice.
And actually, over the years, Icinga has moved a lot from Nagios, in terms of code base and so on. So how much of the current code base is still similar or the same over the original Nagios one?
So code base wise, there's nothing in Icinga 2 which is coming from Nagios at the time. So when we forked it out, it was like Nagios to Icinga. The code base at the beginning was pretty much similar, except all the patches we put in. And with the Icinga 2, which is also C++, so old Nagios and the CGIs were like C code. The only thing you can see which we could have or can have in common is the plugins, where the logic is in all these, like, let's say, plugin driven monitoring systems, because there are a lot out there. And this is pretty much the only thing we have in common these days, that we use and are compatible with the same plugins, but the web interface, the core itself is a totally independent code base and language.
So Nagios, and then Icinga came and were very successful in a world which is quite different from today's world, no? In terms of things to manage and to monitor. How are you coping with a sort of cloud native world where there is no more the host, maybe the service in terms of all the service to manage, or not only that? How are you handling the newer?
I think you're hitting a point here which totally changed when I remember when I started with NETWAYS, which was like 2007 at the time. I think it was like Nagios 1 or 2. I don't remember exactly. That most of our customers we had these days, which is, to be honest, like 15 years ago, a lot of these often big enterprises, they really had no monitoring. So we were coming in and say, okay, where are your resources? Where's your CMDB? And they were like, oh yeah, well, we have an Excel sheet. So even enterprises where I would bet like a couple of $100 for sure, they know where the servers are. They said, yeah, well, when we have an outage, we send some technician guy to data center A and to data center B, and hopefully we'll find the server. So that was totally different. Our project at this time were larger and longer, and we often started with explaining why monitoring makes sense. So very fundamental, why availability makes sense, how notification works, and what escalation is, and what our services are. So we really had to start often from scratch to advocate for monitoring itself. I would say it this way. And nowadays, everyone has something in place. So one of these open source monitoring tools like Anisinga or Zabbix or Prometheus. Also, we see a lot of people they jump away from the traditional monitoring approach, which is more like the availability monitoring, to a metric-based approach, then coming back because they have a lot of metrics, but they don't know how to interpret them, and they do the average of the average, which looks fantastic on a dashboard, but it doesn't give you sometimes a traffic signal, green, orange, red, is just simply to understand. But what we see now that people are a little bit trapped often in, they have some metrics, they have open telemetry and traces and availability monitoring, how to tackle it the right way, and they have something for log management and Elastic and Graylog. So it's like usually in a large enterprise, it's a stack, it's a specialty. It's often like an own team, where a couple of years ago it was like usually the same folks who were not hiding away from who is doing the backup were the same are responsible for doing the monitoring, right? There was no like real role for the monitoring folks. It was just like someone to say, okay, I take care of it. And now usually we have like observability teams or monitoring teams, or because we have something to do with DevOps here, like teams working together and monitoring the application. So this really totally changed from a very mixed and agile observability landscape and tool set customers use to get insights, to where we are coming from using some tool to figure out if a tool is online or not. So that changed really a lot.
And how Icinga is somehow coping with this in terms of trying to, for example, let's say now, chaos engineering, where you break things because single things because you want to test the resiliency of your infrastructure. How can you cope with this kind of, let's say, dynamic and maybe prone to failure infrastructures where failure is somehow acceptable as long as it doesn't affect the overall services?
Yeah, that's definitely a point. You also kind of tackled it in the first question. So what is true is that our, in some way, traditional, but still also like in an innovative approach of doing checks on a regular basis, like 5 minutes or 1 minute or whatever, is something which is not a great fit for like a high dynamic environment like Kubernetes is, for instance, or some cloud environments are. I always would say like some cloud environments, because there are a lot of people out there have a very static load in the cloud and don't like pull it down and up all the time. They just like use it as a data center provider, and then a traditional monitoring can still be a good fit. But like in the highly dynamic environment like Kubernetes, the typical approach of having hosts and services and monitor them this way does not work. So, and we have to tackle this, of course, because even our typical, there's a big difference between what is our user and what is our customers, right? Because a lot of our users have like 10 and 15 hosts and monitor their fridge or their coffee machine at home and their private network. So there's a very large user base monitoring small enterprises. But typically these are not our, let's say, paying customers which have support with us. The customers are usually large enterprises with a very heterogeneous IT infrastructure, with networking and sometimes cloud, sometimes not, but very distributed. Security is a big issue. So it's a totally different perspective. But even for them, our let's say large enterprise customers, of course, they have to deal with Kubernetes nowadays. And so what we did is that we pretty much evolved the old Icinga core, which was kind of the heart of the monitoring system. So every configuration went through the monitoring core, and then at the end executed a plugin to simplify it. We move it as a side and place different modules next to the Icinga core, where in the future, or even like in the first modules we currently have, Icinga 2 itself is responsible for the traditional availability monitoring and executing checks in the desired interval. And then we have modules, for instance, Icinga for Kubernetes, which is taking care of the Kubernetes monitoring, and they send all the events into Icinga notifications. That is also something which is different from how Icinga was a couple of years ago, that if you would like to start a notification and send out an email or I don't know, a Slack message, we needed something like a dummy check in the Icinga 2, where we check a specific module and then do our notifications through the Icinga core. And even that is like now beside Icinga 2. So in the future, Icinga will go into the direction that we have the Icinga 2 as a traditional monitoring approach, and then we have modules like Icinga for Kubernetes, Icinga for Ranger, Icinga for AWS, modules dedicated to the specific environment, which gives us also the ability to have a more concrete interface for it. Like the host service is very, let's say, generic, right? And if we see Kubernetes, for instance, we really can visualize deployments, pods, containers, replica sets, because we know the logic of a Kubernetes infrastructure. And the same would happen for other IT infrastructures or OpenStack, that we understand and give the user a chance to drill down their infrastructure using Icinga and use our centralized notification as a monitoring and an umbrella system. That is pretty much where we're heading right now.
That's interesting. And it's all open source, right? Or also these models?
Yes.
The business model, I guess, is the typical of open source, a mix of training, enterprise support. What are the main sources of revenues in your specific case?
So you said we are coming out of the traditional open source model training support. What we have for a couple of years now is that we have a subscription-based model if you use enterprise Linux. So that's the idea is pretty simple. We thought about, okay, at some point we need to make money because we need to hire more people and we wanted more features. Therefore we were looking for a way how we can make it in a let's say open source friendly way that someone who's like using open source infrastructure and platform can use it still for free. We have a way that if you want like packages and at the end you buy this service from us for a Red Hat Enterprise Linux or a SUSE Enterprise Linux, we assume that you pay subscription for them as well. And then you give us some money that we do the packaging for you for these enterprise distributions. You can, of course, do it on your own. That's fine. There are others out there doing it, but that's one model we used, and it's pretty successful, to be honest. So it worked pretty well. The entry level here is like 5,000 euros, which customers need to pay for it. Of course, there are some people which are absolutely not happy with, like, I thought it's open source and now you want some money and it's a total ripoff. So you have that, and especially in an open source field means you know it as well because you're in that area. I think we have an open source industry, which is, of course, I get it. It's not your question, but I would like to explain a little bit our thoughts. For many years, we went to the customers also with a sales approach to the software is free, and I think even from the business perspective, we made it wrong to say it has like a free access, but it doesn't mean like people make it for nothing. And so we try to find the niche to, if you use an enterprise system and which we assume you give someone else a crazy lot of money to run your enterprise Linux, you can give us some money that we provide everything you need to run Icinga on that enterprise Linux. And if you do something else using Debian or Ubuntu or whatever, you can just get our packages like everybody else can for free without giving us any money. And that's the plan for now.
But sorry for the trivial question. Let's say you have Alma Linux 9, which potentially is not an enterprise Linux, but is compatible with Red Hat 9. The packages for Alma Linux are available, open source, free to download, and people can use them on their own Red Hat systems.
Yeah, we also have. So there are other people out there who are providing the packages, which you can have. So and also the everything is there to build them on your own, right? This is nothing that we don't hide it away, that this is like a secret box how you can create a package. You can do it on your own. It's pretty much just, let's say it's a business deal. Give us money, we take care for it. We give you access if you do like a backport or all that stuff, but it's not rocket science to create these packages. Even the people who do it would kill me now, but it's nothing that we hide something away. It's just we get paid for the effort, for the infrastructure, for providing it, but it's something you can clearly do on your own, no problem at all.
Right. So in these years, AI is everywhere. Have you managed to place it also somewhere in Nagios or in Icinga? Are you planning to do that?
Not really. It means it's super interesting. So we were a couple of weeks ago. There's a fair in Nuremberg, which is a pretty big fair now, coming out of IT security, but it's got a little bit of a broader field now, and it's pretty much impossible to walk by a booth without, like, we have an AI, we have machine learning, we have everything. So it's of course a hype. We are looking into it. So we don't have anything right now. We are looking into how we can use it from the data perspective. One thing is that usually we have local data, right? So the users have their data. So if you would really like to do machine learning algorithm or do like a pre-training something, they perhaps don't have the infrastructure to do so. But of course, it would be beneficial to work with all the monitoring data and analyze them to a machine learning process, to go over it and just like, and you can do it right now. You just like export your Icinga log events and put them into a self-hosted Olama or Llama 3.2 and say, analyze it and tell me what typical time of the day most of the services end up in an error state. You get a pretty solid result for this. So one thing is having a central cloud service for us available where customers can just sign up or sign in and pretty much send an open and transparent amount of data to a central web service where we can analyze it, because I'm not sure if analyze on a client base would make sense, but we will see. I think from a marketing perspective, it's something you should have already, of course, and it should be on every slide that we have machine learning, AI, and all that stuff. But from the implementation point of view, I think it would make sense to look where all the others are heading, what real AI they have, because most of the time, if you really look into it, it's just like an algorithm looking for something, and that is not my understanding of an artificial intelligence. But of course, we cannot close our eyes before this trend, and for pattern analysis and for prediction, it's definitely something we should look into it. And there's a huge potential from the technology field in the future, of course.
Oh, anyway, it's good that you are not boasting any AI-related feature or claiming your own page for the moment. So you just don't jump in the hype just for the sake of it. So that's a good thing in my eyes, no? And
yeah. In your eyes, in other eyes, would say we need to have it, right? That it's a little bit of the.
Well, if you have it and it's useful, it makes sense. If you have it because it's a marketing thing, and then maybe at the end you have some kind of wrap over ChatGPT with some kind of rag inside. It depends on the real.
Exactly. That's exactly true.
So IT infrastructures are changing. I guess you are old enough, like me, to have seen a lot of things happening and happened in the years. And there are trends, there are new things popping up, and the same things still around, legacy world, cloud native world. Your vision on how and where we are heading in terms of IT infrastructures, and so consequentially of how you monitor them.
So the first time I really get in touch with infrastructure automation was looking into CF Engine, which in some way could be considered the mother of all, like in some way, modern IT infrastructure, right? Because it definitely inspired Luke Hennies at the end to make something like Puppet. I remember what totally changed when we started with Puppet, like you in a very early phase where Puppet Labs was reductive labs, and it was really just Luke sitting pretty much 24/7 in some chat and try to help people with Puppet. We were in a phase when we visited like customers and talked to them and say, hey, we have these automation, we can do that and that, and pretty much the mindset was absolutely no script will do auto manage my infrastructure, so forget about it. Never. Then over the years we did a lot of stuff with Puppets. Even it was in some way I would describe it the same like life cycle which we had with monitoring, that at the beginning people really don't have something in place. They had some like cluster SSH or their own script framework to do automation, but not really a solution. So all the projects we started with a Puppet was mostly really new, so like new to IT automation. And over the time, it changed a lot that and it would say from the NETWAYS perspective, we pretty much only see from now is more Ansible customers and Ansible users. It changed a lot, which does not mean that they are not any more Puppet users. Of course they are, and they are crazy big Puppet infrastructures. But as far as I would see it, there is no one which has pretty much nothing, which was true 10 years ago, right? Everybody has some automation, and even these heavy Puppet users, they figured out how to deal with their Puppet infrastructure anymore. They don't need a consultancy company, or they need some consultancy sometimes, but they are able to tackle the infrastructure. So what we see is for the things when people in an on-premise world, let's see it from that perspective, they often use Ansible to create the missing glue to just start up the components, to fire up some Kubernetes or fire up some OpenStack, even some OpenStack on Kubernetes sometimes, because it's a very interesting approach to run an OpenStack on Kubernetes, but it's a different story. So that is what we see in the typical cloud usage. It's Terraform. It's still there. There's a lot of like struggle in the community with OpenTofu and all that things because of the license change. And in the last years, I would say it's interesting that more and more companies came up with try to provide a way where you get like you get a synchronized perspective on defining code and modifying infrastructure, for instance, at your cloud provider, compared to what the Terraform approach is. Like you configure, you plan, you roll out. But you're always in control. I see tools like System Initiative, which is a very interesting thing in my perspective, where it's like you can configure it on a visual approach. You can define your infrastructure, but also if someone else is doing something in your AWS account, you get a notification and it's going to be pops up. So like a synchronized state between your configuration and the real state in the system. I think there's a future for that, and I think there's a market for it. And then there are others are successful, like Pulumi, and all these more like developer-driven configuration tools. I think that the market will move there to a more developer-focused orchestration. I think that will be more the future than the admins having their design and architecture orchestration tool. It will be more glued together, and I think it will be moved more into API, directly talking to service providers and enabling the developers doing it in their landscape, perhaps with an editor, than moving to the, let's say, old sysadmin world, even if this is not true. I don't know if you had a look to see System in it or something like this.
Oh yeah, actually I have an interview with Adam in a few days. So if you have any question to ask him, let me know.
Yeah, now Paul Steck showed me that a couple of times. So one of the System Initiative tools, and at the beginning I saw it, I was like, I was not sure if that could be a thing, to be honest. Like 2 years ago, pretty much now, and I saw him again. I think it was like the 15 years DevOps anniversary or something this year in Antwerp, and he showed me the current version, and I was like, yeah, well, this could be really a thing. It could be a thing to visualize it down, because even, and I know there's a discussion in like, I want everything in a YAML or a CLI, but it could get unhandy as well if you have like 100 of lines of codes in a Terraform to find the right thing. And the visual approach they have and their graph is something which can make even large infrastructure understandable for people outside the architecture business. Let's say the architect will always understand it, even if you configure it or having a YAML or Terraform or Pulumi. So the guys or the folks who design something, they will wrap their mind around it. But for others, it's super hard to look on someone else's infrastructure and get an idea how it works. And I think that System Initiative can help here a lot to visualize an IT architecture, if it's in the cloud, or they have different providers for other tools, or plan to do so in the future. I think that could be an interesting approach.
And you see maybe also in the monitor space an approach similar, where you don't define what to monitor, means somehow you automatically detect what is to be monitored.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be something that we hook up with these tools and like monitoring, basically, even if you lose like an Icinga director, or if you use Nagios, right? If you have your old Perl script hell and generate Nagios files, which is still fine, because for a lot of people it's still a valid thing. It definitely should be a part of some life cycle, even if it's like a ticketing system based, or use automation, Ansible, Puppet. So we always tell every user, the customers, if you're monitoring and your understanding of what needs to be monitored is not automated and not part of a life cycle, you will fail at some point. So perhaps you are able to keep up the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then someone will, I don't know, create an email, please monitor service XYZ, and at this time you will fail. And then you end up having like your re-engineering of a project. So absolutely, monitoring has to be part of your life cycle. Whatever you do on whatever platform you use to run your business, it has to be a part of it, and has to be part of a configuration management system of a hardware deployment or whatever you have. Absolutely.
Good. So I would say let's move to more mundane questions. I'm interested in your vision of the future, and for example, how will be the computer you will be using every day in 20 years? What shape will it have? What is it?
20 years is it's a very long time frame.
Yes, still, if you think about that, we have seen 20 years of computing and more, and many things are the same. We have still keyboards, mouses, screens. Maybe they are flat
I
now.
I think that computers will be, in 20 years, will be just a partner to you, and not something you. It will just something which is in your life, and even if it's like a walking robot, or just like a symbol on your wall, or a TV, or whatever we have at this time, but the computer will be a partner. I think the whole AI thingy is underestimated. Perhaps not from the hardcore technical people working in that field, but I think that the consequences of AI will be brutal in a way that we have. It will end up in a lot of people losing their job for very stereotype and simplistic work, like double checking and all the things. So we will see. I think we will see a lot of the work landscape will change, and a lot of people will not be required, and means it's also then a challenge, because you cannot transform every job into another job. Someone who's like doing basic, I don't know, validation of insurance documents. It's just like a stupid example. Please, no insurance document validator. Kill me afterwards. You cannot make him to a person taking care of elderly people, which you desperately need, for instance. So this will not happen. And I think that AI is the next industrial revolution we will have. I think we are currently into it, which stresses me out a little bit, that pretty much Europe is not a part of this game. So even all the fundamental ideas about embeddings and how machine learning and neural network functioning is comes especially from Europe and from Germany, from the Munich University, and the fundamental technology is like 20-25 years or older. So it's not a new thing, but we didn't have the compute power at the time. And the compute power made it possible. And if you just look back right now for 4 or 5 years, ChatGPT or these tools at this time could solve, it was like, well, it was more nice to play with it, right? It was just like a chat assistant. You write something, you get a good answer. How is your day? Blah, blah, blah. It was very simplistic. It was like an advanced Tamagotchi, I would say, something you played with a little bit. And now we really see more and more work is done by the AI. So you're really using like specific IDEs like Cursor, where you put your old code into it, and the AI is permanently like rewriting and optimizing code. You can prompt complex tasks into ChatGPT, where you get a complete code snippet out of it. So we have just as an example, we have an advent calendar at NETWAYS, where we just like every day open a door with a prize. It's included in our website. It's PHP, and there's no single line coded. The whole thing completely was a prompt, 20 lines, and ChatGPT generated the complete code. The only thing we had to do, our designer had to create the images, but the rest of this was fully generated. So
and the code was working since the beginning, out of the box.
The code was copied it from ChatGPT, placed it in a function PHP in the WordPress theme, and that's it. So no code modification required. I mean, this is not rocket science, and but still for a good PHP developer, it was like a day of testing and I don't know, having the data in a JSON file, loading it, which day is today. So all these things, and you can prompt it out. And it's something you can do now. And I would say, except the experts, the majority of users of ChatGPT, for instance, even have not reached that level with ChatGPT. They still like summarize the text, give me 3 bullet points, going through email because it's very good in text work because of how these embeddings function. And moving from this and looking like 5, 10, or like you said, 20 years in the future, I think you will talk to the computer like your companion, your friend, your wife, your husband, and it will be there all the time. It will solve issues for you. You will just say, order Siri, Alexa, or Gianluca, order some toilet paper here, do something this. Everything which can be done digital will be done digital by someone else, and you will not do it. You will not order something. You will not look up the best price. You will not book a flight. Everything will be done by something. And for sure, this will happen, I think. I'm pretty sure that will happen.
And what's your personal feeling at the idea that in some years, even now, but in some years it will be more and more, we will not be able to understand if a text or image or a video will be made by a computer or a human, a mix. So there will be not anymore the ability to understand what is human-made, what is not human-made. Is that something that creates any discomfort to you, or is that part of natural evolution of this world?
I think both is true. It's part of evolution. It will happen, and there's currently public available platforms for this, like Synthesia, where you can create your video in some like virtual person speaks it in, and some are very easy to see that it's not real, and others are really good. I don't have a problem with. That's, for instance, like these training videos you have to do, and would like to do like an offline training or some tutorials. It's really hard to do it in person, update it all the time because technology is moving forward. I think it makes total sense for someone who wants to have like a video tutorial for installing Icinga. And we need to update it every 3 or 4 months. It makes total sense that we generate this video instead of have to sit someone in front of the camera all the time and cut it and everything. It's a lot of effort. I think so I'm fine with that part of the evolution. Which I'm frightened a little bit is the part of what is true and what is not true. Especially because in media, in politics, in how can I say it? Means if a machine explains me how we install Puppet or install Icinga and configures Kubernetes, I don't care if it's a generated avatar or a real person. Real person, perhaps it has more charm. It's more charming, but anyway, it will work. But what is the truth? And I think technology-wise, it will be super hard. It is in the really good tools is hard now. In a couple of years, it will be pretty much not possible, except perhaps for an expert to figure out if it's reality or not. And that will play in hands with that will end up in political results. How political like wings use the media, the not trusting media. So I think that media is important and journalism is important. But if you cannot identify which is true and which is not, then it's super hard to learn and create your own opinion, if you know what I mean. So that is a big concern, I think. If you don't know what the truth is, how will you be able to make a good decision at some point? Because you always have to doubt, what is my source of truth? And this falls apart if the source of truth falls apart. I don't know how we as a society and also how our brains work, we will just end up with like cognitive dissonance and try to create our own truths to not fall down in a black hole. So yeah, that's challenging. So media journalism I think nobody has a recipe how to keep up with this. I think everybody is like, yeah, well, we see it coming, but what should we do? And even now they try to, when someone sends in from like a war zone and videos where it comes out a week later that this is not valid and that was like made up. It happens all the time right now that there are videos which later on they figure out that this has never happened and the picture material is like 10 years old and was published somewhere else. So it's happened all the time and we see it more and more. So yes, I don't know. But I think at the end it will happen. We cannot change it. We have to live with it.
And your opinion on the attempts to regulate AI as the European community is trying to do with the AI Act, which looks for the moment to be a sort of a break to the evolution. But in other parts, it tries to establish some, let's say, common rules, which probably makes sense under some points of view, no? Knowing how is trained a model, knowing what are the data, what is the data used, the source of the data, and probably handle in some way what the model does and how it works. So I don't know, any kind of regulation about AI is something that we should regulate. Or let's let it go free, run free, and let's see what happens.
I think the problem is I'm totally pro of having a good standard and having a mindful regulation and a mindful usage of things. But the problem is that it means what is we, right? But I see myself as a European. We don't have any power. So we are not in that game. And I would say the train already left the station. This is like done. So we can spend the next 10 years to regulate something which nobody cares, right? This is like if you produce like a car which is able to drive 20 kilometers per hour and want to regulate like high-speed autobahn, because nobody would care about your opinion because anyone would say, well, what do you want with your car? And that's the same with AI. I'm not saying that they're in Germany or in the European Union, there's no interesting AI business. Yeah, but the core AI stuff is done in the US. If it's like OpenAI, it was what Elon Musk is doing. If it's like Microsoft driving this development, if it's like Meta. So we have some approaches in having language models in Europe, for instance, like Mistral is an interesting project. But so from the industry perspective, operating system, Windows, Mac, the AI, Apple Intelligence, everything is done in the US. There's another thing like producing the chips that happens somewhere else. But if we as Europeans say, I don't know, an extreme opinion, right? AI is forbidden. Like, yeah, well, who cares? It's like, okay, do whatever you want. So I think this is too late. This is done.
Yeah, but with this, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't have any real opinion on this because it's too complex, I guess, to evaluate the pros and cons of regulating or not. At the same time, I will say, okay, the train has already started and we are at the station. But if you don't start to regulate, then it's okay to leave unregulated. And maybe and there could be problems in leaving, not only in the short term, in the mid-long term, unregulated things. Or maybe it's like, the markets and the landscape will evolve and auto fix itself, even if I'm not so confident in it.
It means you get a point, and I'm also not saying that what my opinion is right now is like the well thought through. I took hours of it as it's just what comes into my mind right now. But the problem is, I think I think I'm a totally fan of regulating the important things, absolutely. But you only can regulate things and can have influence on something if you also have the power to do so. And I think we don't have the power. That's our problem. What do we have on stake? What do we have in the hand to say, no? The only power we have I would say, is the customer. So the market, that's the only thing what as Europe, not the only thing, but you know what I mean, right? That's the biggest asset we can bring on the table is our customers, and say, okay, if you want like to enter that market, you have to make sure you accept and go through these validations. If you want to provide cloud service in Europe, you have to take care of GDPR, because that is how our personal data protection in Europe works. And if you want to do serious business here, you have to accept it and provide data processing under these GDPR regulations. And that makes sense. And the same thing, but this is like a market access argument, right? And in the AI field, it could be the same. And I guess, as far as I know, that is what we already see, that providers have to disable their features in a European market because they are not allowed by regulations. That will end up in hitting the customer also, because they want that features. And I think most of the customers don't care so much about the consequences than not having a desired feature. And I think the customers will make a lot of political pressure to the politicians to adapt to another rule set or to another regulations which are more brought in from the US. So I think the problem is that our politicians don't have the support by the people anymore. Not in a broad field, but just from this regulation and data, and because people don't understand it. As I want to use like Apple Intelligence, I want to use Microsoft Recall to bring me up which bag I Googled 10 weeks ago, and I cannot have it. And I think people will not say, oh, I'm happy that I don't have this feature because everyone in the world has AI, but during regulation, it's not available in Germany. I think that is not what people will think. People will be unhappy that they cannot participate in this technology, I think. And therefore, it would be hard to withstand it, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. It's already happening. Sora, for example, just released, is not available in Europe, and for the moment, as
which one is that?
Sora, the AI, OpenAI video tool,
Yeah.
SORA.
Yeah, Sora. Okay. Yeah, and we're already in this, right?
Yeah, we're already in this. At the same time, I don't know. I mean, I don't have really opinions on that, because also the big rip-off of all the existing work done by graphicians, musicians, text writers, used to feed the models without any recognition, without any copyright care. It's already done. It's there. The images we see in the background are done by some kind of model journey based on who knows what kind of artist creation, and who is going to pay that artist? Nobody, of course, or a photographer or whatever. So yes, it's an hard thing, and as it happens with these new markets, they start unregulated, they run fast. And when it comes to regulations, it's probably already late.
I would say you are right. And overall, it was the speed was underestimated, right? The speed, how quickly we have some ChatGPT. I remember where people said, have you tried this out, right? It was like, you have to check this out, to, okay, check this out, funny, to we have like now popping up a new business idea every day around this field, was totally underestimated. I would say by everyone. Nobody would see that 2 years ago where we are now. Not the politicians, and also not the technical experts. Like, I would assume, like we or others in our field would not say that it's going to be so quickly. We see really a whole industry going to be surrounding this and coming up with every new products every day.
Indeed. Yeah, as I always say, I feel like all these discussions about AI reminds me of the discussion about the internet at the beginning of the century. When everybody was talking about the new thing, and you couldn't stop from talking about that because it's so new, and there has been probably similar dynamics, no? A bubble. Now we are in a sort of bubble, a lot of victims, but the winners will be huge. No, the winners of the internet revolution are the most valuable companies in the world.
Absolutely, and with AI, I guess it will be the same, because at the end, even if it's just on the first-hand side, a beneficial technology for people will survive and will be successful, whatever regulation you come in. And even if it is downside afterwards, like people losing jobs, technology get out of hands, and all this will happen. And perhaps in 10 years, we will look back and say, holy shit, we should prevent this from happening, but that will be no chance to do it. It's a beneficial technology for a lot of people, and there will be no chance to stop it, I think.
Right. If it's useful, it will be successful. That's the point.
Yeah.
Okay, Bernd, I guess we are a bit over time also because we started a bit late today for my fault. I usually ask what is the question I haven't asked which you would like to reply to, something that you want to talk about.
Do we have all your Christmas presents? Would be a good question for this time of the year. And I don't have them.
Okay.
No, I don't have a better question in mind, to be honest. It was like a wild ride from Icinga to AI, but it was fun. And it was also good seeing you.
Yeah, and I guess we will meet again soon, probably in Ghent, if you go there.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful, Bernd. Thanks again, and see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Alessandro. Bye-bye.
Bye.